Greetings friends, welcome to A Shot of Code. Today we're going to write the API for our web push application. So the previous video we did web push end to end, but we didn't actually store the subscriptions in a database just because it was going to take too long. So I've got a separate video here now to look at that. First of all though, let's have a quick look and a recap at the web push. So I've got Visual Studio Code open here with what we created. I'll put a link to that video here. Worth a look if you haven't seen that. But we've basically got an index HTML page with a service worker that lets us call subscribe when the user clicks on our subscribe button. So a user initiated web push acceptance. You know, the user wants to receive notifications, and then the result from this subscribe, in the last video we just stored that manually and ran it on the server ourselves. But what we're trying to do in this one, I've added this little bit of code here already, is call an API to store this in a database. So we'd have lots of users on the website. Every time they do a subscription, call the API and store it away, and then when we want to send subscriptions to send notifications to all of them, we can just query that database. So that is the existing project, and we've got web push in here. We used the npm package web push, and that allowed us to send that out. So we'll use this again, but we'll use it using the database rather than just hard coding it in. Right, so I'll close that one down for the moment. Let's go in here and we're going to create our API. I'm going to use .NET Core for this. So I would do .NET New Web API, and this will scaffold a very basic API for us, a REST API. So if I open this up and have a look, at the moment we've got a weather forecast object, and in our controllers we've got a weather forecast controller, and we've got a method to handle, we're going to need that, yes, a method to handle get requests, and that is just going to return some of those dates. So if I just run this for the moment, we should see that working straight away, just running it locally. So if we were to call this with weather forecast, then we're getting that data back there. So we'll just make that a bit bigger, like so. So that's up and running. What we need to do though is store the subscription details. Now if I go back here again actually for a second, we can see the kind of thing we need to store. It's quite long, but it's got an endpoint, so we're going to need this massive endpoint here, and then also we're going to need the auth code and the P256DH code, and they all come under keys. So when we send this data back to the server using our fetch, we're going to JSON stringify it. So I just need to match that object in .NET, and it should just import that object for us without too much pain. Right, let's start in here then. So at the moment we've got this weather forecast object. I don't want that. I'm going to want to create my own subscription object, and for that I'm going to use .NET Core Framework, the Entity Framework Core, sorry. So let's do a .NET add package, and we'll add in Entity Framework Core. So these are pretty quick. Core and SQL Server. So we need 3 packages here to get this up and running, and design. So Entity Framework Core is going to allow us to create just a plain old CLR object, and then it is going to make the database tables from that for us automatically. Right, how do we do this? Well, we're going to need to, first thing we're going to need to is put a using statement for Entity Framework Core. Then I need to make a DB context class. So I want a subscription DB context, and it is going to inherit from DB context. See, it does need to be a class. And in here, we'll be able to add our tables and access them within our code. So let's create one of the table. We're going to have a subscription table, and in there, along with the fields, so we're going to have the endpoint and the keys, but we also need to give it a primary key for Entity Framework to be happy. So we'll have an int in here, subscription ID, and just provide a get and set. So that will keep Entity Framework happy. Then we can literally specify our fields. So we're going to have an endpoint with a getter and a setter, and then I'm going to have my keys. So I'm going to need to create that. Let me just get a bit more space down here, and this, I'll just reuse this one. So we'll get rid of weather forecast completely, and we'll have another. Basically, we're going to have another table here, keys. So we need a primary key on this. So keys ID, like so. And then those other two items that we need to store, which are the auth like so, and what was the other one? P256DH. So I need these to be the same name so that it can map the JSON object that we're going to pass in to our REST interface. So back on here we have keys and keys, and that should provide that relationship. We should get a foreign key inserted into the keys table. Now we'll have that set up correctly. Right. This does need, although it's Entity Framework Core is going to create the tables and stuff for us, we do need an actual SQL Server. So I'm going to go into Azure, and that's where I'm going to create one for us. So I've actually already created one here, push test 3. So we're going to reuse this. Now, if I go into the query editor, I'm just going to need the password, and I'm going to grab that. So I've got a snippet here that I want to put in. So let's go back to the startup in our web API, and we need to tell it that we're going to have this subscription context. So in services, I can do services add DB context. We will need a using statement in here for Entity Framework again, and I'll need one for the SQL Server part. And then so let's go back. Let's rename this weather forecast while we're here. So this is subscription DB context. So this has got our model and our context in. But let me grab that name and put it in there. Okay, the squiggle's gone now. So what this does is give us our connection string. So you can see pointing to our database here, and we will have a password in here that I'll change after this video. So there's our password to this database. If it lets me grab it. So grab that there. If we go back to Azure, and we can now get into our database. Now, I've done this obviously before, so I'm just going to drop those for the moment. So drop table subscription, and drop table keys, and also drop table EF migration. So we should see these disappear now when I refresh. Okay, so we've got no tables there. So we're starting blank there. We're going to use the entity framework to create this for us. So in our controller, I can nuke this weather stuff here. What we need to do now is use dependency injection to get an instance of our DB context in here. So let's have another using statement for entity framework. And on our constructor, which I want to rename as well. So let's rename that to subscription controller. What we want to do is pass in a subscription DB context and then store that off within our class. So we'll have an underscore DB there, and then we will store our injected database context into this underscore DB. Right. Let's change this get here. So this get will allow us to enumerate all of the subscriptions, and we should be able to do that by simply saying underscore DB dot subscription. Okay, it's not exposing it yet. Ah, yes. So I've created my model, subscription and keys, but they're not on my DB context. So what we need to add on here is a DB set of our model, subscription, and we'll call that subscription, and it will have a getter and setter as well. Now with that there, if I now go back to my controller, I should have subscription. And when we call, I'm going to call basically toList on this, but I need it to include any foreign, any data from foreign key tables. So I need to do an include and say I want the keys data in here, because otherwise it wouldn't get included by default. And then we can just say toList. So that will give us everything that's in the database. We're also going to add a post method, and we'll specify that that is going to be subscribe. So when I enter a value in here, that is what we would need to add on the URL. If I go back in here, at the moment we're calling this, but we're going to be calling subscribe, and it's going to be on it's going to be something like 127.0.1.550. Oh, something like that. We'll have to check, because I'll just run it locally, but that will be the REST URL that we want to call there. Right, so let's go back here, and so this one we're going to call subscribe, like so. And what do we want to do in here? We're not going to return a list, we're just going to return a result, and I want to access the database again, get to subscriptions, and I just want to add, so Entity Framework provides all of this for us, I just want to add a new object. Now this is going to be passed in the body of our request, and if I just specify that as a subscription object and say new sub, then that should all get mapped from the JSON that we send in, and I should just be able to pop that in there. Just need to do a save changes, and then we can return an OK here. So that should allow us to store off the new user subscription. Okay, let me have a quick look around. What do we need? We need on here. We need another little snippet. What do we need? Yes, we need a constructor. So I need a subscription DB context constructor that takes DB context options of our class and it calls the base class with that parameter. So this just allows us to, if I go back into my startup and where we're doing add DB context, this is going to get passed in to the constructor in here. So that's why I needed to add that back in. This is, you can see this this options parameter is what's going to come in, and that's going to configure our DB context and give us the connection to the database. Okay, right, I'm going to try and build it. Okay, we've got a build first time, very good. Well, I have run through this a couple of times, so, but on this one first, that's good. Okay, what do we need to do now? We need to get our tables created in our database. So I can do a .NET Entity Framework migrations and I can give it a name. Now, if you haven't used Entity Framework before, I don't expect to understand this, but this is basically how we're gonna, this is gonna generate a SQL that will be run against in our SQL server to create the tables. Okay, so it's created that, and we've got a migrations folder in here, and there's our data. And then I can do a database update, and that should actually create those tables. So if I come back now into Azure and do a refresh, we will see we've got our subscription table, keys, and then this migrations history. So that we can add new fields and remove fields, change the types, all without writing any SQL DDL when we're using Entity Framework Core, because it generates all that DDL for us, and we just run it with this database update command. So it's pretty good when it works. If things can get out of sync, then it's a little bit tricky, but pretty good for a fairly straightforward project. Right, that is set up pretty well. So let's see if we can get our subscription stored in this database. So I'll put a breakpoint here. Oh, one other thing we're going to need, because I'm doing this on a separate one, we're going to get a cause error. I'll let it come up so you can see it. So I'm going to start debugging our new API. And we're going to call this subscribe call. Let me go back. We're going to call this subscribe with a post from our application. So we're considering the user is over here. Let me try and put these side by side. So this is our server. We're not going to see anything on that, so I don't really want to do that. Let's put this up over here. Okay, so we're on our web page and we're looking to subscribe. Let's bring this back down. Oh no, this is the weather forecast, sorry. Alright, I'm going to go full screen. There's too much to look at. Okay, so let's go back into our web push example and open that up. Okay, so we've got our subscribe button. Made that too small. And if I clear that. Now when I do this, when I click on this, we will again come into this code and call subscribe on our push manager on our service worker. And that will return us our unique information so I can be uniquely identified for push notifications. That information we are going to send to our API, which is on this port here. If I bring up this one here, that is where we're sending it to. So let's give it a go. So I click subscribe. Ooh, protocol error. Subscribe. I did a post. Let's go back and check our API. So I've got a HTTP post and subscribe. I spelt it right. Try that again. SSL. Okay, so if I take secure off, will it let me do it then? Ooh, method not allowed. Okay. Let's leave HTTPS on. Somewhere we've got something that's not quite right. Oh, localhost. Where did this actually run? Let's close that off and start it up again. All right, so we're on localhost 5001. So this is 5001 is where we want to be calling. So if I come in here, I can ditch that one. So if I open this up again, and yeah, this is on 5500, and I do subscribe now. Ah! Error search authority invalid. It's getting confused on. Let's say local host 5001. Refresh. Okay. Okay, we're good. Now we're getting the cause error. So I was just getting confused with the ports and which website's which. So yeah, we're getting a cause error now because we're not coming from the same site. So we can add this into our web API. So if I shut this down and we go into startup and configure services, similar to adding the DB context, I'm going to add a cause, and we want to allow calls from this site 5500, which is correct. This is where the user's clicking subscribe from. So that's good. So I've just given it a name in here. So I'll put that in. And then we just need to do one last thing, which is actually say use it. So in configure services, we say add, and then in configure, we actually specify that we are going to use it. Okay, let's run that again now. So that's my 501. So I can get rid of the old 501 there. So we're on subscribe. We're going to try and call our web API. We've hit our breakpoint. And we've passed in a new subscription. You can see it's got an endpoint there. And it's got the auth and P256. So when I step through this, it's going to try and store it into the database. Okay, that should be stored. So we can go and check now in Azure. If I look in here and do select star from subscription, we should see we've got a subscription ID 1. It's got an endpoint and it's got a link to keys 1. So if I do a select star from keys, then we should see that entry in there. So yeah, there's the auth and there is the P256. So we've managed to store that in there. Now, with that in place, you would have lots of these in there. And then when you want to send notifications, you would have another app, a console app. I might do another video on this that would enumerate those and then call web push against them, and that will blast it out to all of the users. Or you could pick a certain subset of the users. And once you've got them in the database here, you can allow them to delete their subscriptions, or you can delete them over time and so on. So that is it. That's how we store the web push notification subscriptions. I hope that was interesting. It's quite a long one, I know, but yeah, that makes it a bit more complete. I'll do one more where we actually enumerate those in a console app. But there we go for now. So if you like that, give me a thumbs up. If not, thumbs down. If you want to see some more of these videos, then feel free to click that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.